Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. And in this episode, I spoke to Dr. Josh McConkey, the author of Be the Weight Behind the Spear. A guy, a fascinating history. And I'm just going to put it out there. He does not look old enough to have done everything he's done. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. How are you doing?
Doing very good. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it. And today we're here to talk about your book, The Weight Behind the Spear. Just before we get into that, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an emergency physician. I'm also a commander in the U.S. Air Force, Army combat veteran. Spent a little time as a professor at Duke University and now a award-winning best-selling author. So I'm kind of a MacGyver. I wear a lot of different hats.
So, because the thing that always fascinates me about this is how people fit it in to get all of it done.
Well, I kind of joke about it, but I call it constructive ADD. I just have always stayed busy my entire life. Writing books, a couple of like a screenplay here or there, and then I love my family. Spent a lot of time coaching with the kids, soccer and some baseball when they were younger, and you just make time for things that matter. And I've just been blessed to have a career where I've got to do some pretty amazing things. So I just roll with it. I can't change who I am. I'm 47 years old now. That's just who I am.
So, but I'm going to make the assumption you're not somebody that scrolls social media, watches much YouTube, or sits down and watches the TV.
I don't. That's the one thing that's the give is that I don't get to watch much TV.
So it's just, because I always, one of the things I love about doing the podcast is I just get to ask people how they maintain a focus, and some people just have a discipline about focus. And some people I'm passionate about doing this, and so they don't even think about it as being a focus. But there seems to always be this common trend that nobody has this passion for just watching YouTube reels or Instagram reels. They just no, I've got work to do. It's just kind of like this. It's when I say blinkered, I don't mean in the sense that they're narrow-minded or narrow-visioned. It's like tunnel focus. It's just like, yeah, this is the way I've got to go.
Yeah, I spent and saw a lot of scary things, and I just have put the focus on trying to make a difference and just pay it forward for the men and women that didn't make it home. And you just put it real simple that you stare death in the face and you see some crazy things. Nobody cares how big your house is or what kind of car you drive or how much money you're making. None of that really matters. So for me, if I'm not out there doing something that matters and is making a difference, then it's a waste of my time. So that's kind of my philosophy.
Did any of that come from your childhood?
My dad is a very hard worker. We're a blue collar guy. My entire family was railroaders. So my great grandfather, my grandfather, and my father. I was the first McConkey to go to college. So everyone's always working hard. I mean, there was never any hanging out, sitting down, watching TV. It was go reshingle the roof or go dig me some ditches in the backyard, putting in a sprinkler system or painting. There wasn't really a lot of downtime. So I suppose it had a lot to do with how I turned out. Yeah, but I give my dad some credit there.
Do you say you're from a family of railroad workers?
Yeah. My dad was Burlington Northern and Old Milwaukee Railroad. If you're a fan of the old school railroads. And then the Old Milwaukee Railroad for my grandfather and great-grandfather, it went bankrupt in the early 80s, and that's when my dad had to find another job, went to the Burlington Northern.
Because one of the, and I know we're kind of getting away from the book, but we'll come back to it, I promise. Because the reason that fascinates me is we were literally talking about the history of where I lived before we started recording. But one of the things that fascinates me when I'm talking to Americans is there is this kind of like the reverse fascination is how old things are. Like you said, you've actually seen Stonehenge and you've seen Salisbury Cathedral, and you're like, wow. Yep. But I had the reverse fascination because your father, grandfather, and great grandfather were an integral part of the history of America and its development. And the railroads is probably one of the most significant developments that changed America. And to be able, you have what I call living history within reach. So I can never talk to somebody who was part of Salisbury Cathedral, Stonehenge. There's no connection. There is nobody alive. Right? That people still debate today why Stonehenge even exists, and debate how they did it. Whereas
it's an incredible feat.
Yeah. And there was even a new thing come up out the other day where they think one of the stones is actually from Scotland and not from Wales, like originally thought. So they still trying to work it out. Whereas if you knew your grandfather, if he's still alive, or great grandfather, the expansion of America is part of your DNA, and it was part of their living history. And I'm really fascinated by that, because they saw things and developed things that happened for the first time, and it's still tangible. You can still touch that history.
My great my great grandfather had given an interview in this old Wild West journal that my dad has a copy of.
Wow.
And he was interviewed, and it's a whole story about the Nez Perce tribe when they were, trying to leave the U.S., going towards Canada with Chief Joseph. And my great grandfather was a part of that. And there's an old Wild West magazine that kind of chronicled that story that my dad has a copy of that I've read. And you talk about some just history and being able to reach out and touch that. I mean, it's a magazine article I can read about my great grandfather.
That's I mean, I cool. love that. I love that almost as much, if not more, than I love the old history. I love the history that's so, and the reason being is, if you go back 200-300 years in America, it practically didn't exist almost.
Yeah.
So that expansion is, in historical terms, is modern. But it's look what happened. It's like, because the thing about Europe is we can trace it right back to prehistoric time.
Yeah. And
with America, although you had the indigenous people there, and there's debates about who was there before them, because there are debates about, with the Younger Dryas period and stuff like, there being prehistoric people there. It's that modern expansion where America went from a country as we know it that didn't exist to arguably the greatest country in modern history, certainly in terms of its military might and its economic power. And to be able to be like literally look at something and say my dad or my granddad or laid that track, and that is that integral part of history. I love it so much, because it's
pretty cool to talk about like that. Yeah,
it was so obtainable. You could actually, do you know what I mean? It's like, if I could, like, there's this whole thing about Salisbury Cathedral and where the stones came from, and there was these like horse and carts or ox and carts. Now, if I could talk to the blacksmith that made the shoes that were fitted on the horse, or something like, or the guy that drove the cart, that would fascinate me, or the stonemason. But you can't. It's just history. But like you and I were talking about the Magna Carta.
Yeah.
There's nobody exists today that is even connected to whoever, or you would know who was connected to who wrote that Magna Carta, or who delivered it. Do you know what I mean? There's all these weird things. Whereas that entire history of the railroad, which is a big part of the American West history and the cowboy history and the culture, there's people still around who were part of it, and I just they're living monuments, and I just love it. So anyway, that's my little fanboy moment out the way.
Yeah, sweet.
So moving on to the weight behind the spear. When did you start getting an inkling that you wanted to write a book, or write this book?
It was probably about 2021. So I had just come back from Australia, and we spent some time at Flinders University in Adelaide. And just coming back to the U.S. with the post-COVID, more of a debacle, there was a whole generation of Americans. So that age right there, like high school, college, where these kids got shut out of schools, shut out of churches, And you could just see immediately the social impact that it had on them. These kids didn't have just basic communication skills.
Mm.
I mean, they interact, that whole generation was really tied to the iPhones and those types of things anyways, but then you took COVID in there and you completely isolated them and their communication skills, their resiliency. I started seeing more anxiety, depression, and even suicides, and people come into my emergency rooms. And then once I took command as a military commander, working with these kids and trying to develop leadership skills and resiliency, I just put the two together and like, wow, this COVID generation has some very unique challenges. I don't think we did them a great service. And I really wrote the book as a call to action for people to engage their communities and do something for this COVID generation before it's too late, because they just lack the skills that they really need to be successful. And I want to hand the keys to this country over to them in 15, 20 years so I can punch out and retire.
Yeah.
And I need them to be ready.
Yeah, but it's true though, isn't it? It's one of the things that people underestimate, and I hear different opinions on this all the time, and I talk a lot about on my podcast about the difference between anybody who grew up before the internet and anyone that grew up before smartphones. Because
Yes.
if you grew up before smartphones and before the internet, you cannot understand what it's like to grow up today. Because you and I were talking about your family line, but if you went to your dad's school when your dad was a kid, you'd recognize it as a classroom. You'd know exactly what the rules of the playground were. Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
And then the internet and smartphone came along, and we don't know what that's like to grow up with WhatsApp groups, Facebook, Instagram. We don't know that.
The social media then is just fuel to the fire,
Yeah.
for the mental health crisis. It's seen around the world. I see it in the US and have seen Australia and New Zealand. But the social media has a huge part to play in that as well. So it's a complete, it's a generational divide for sure.
I think it's a huge one. And I've often discussed if we can truly figure it out for them, because like I said, is your father, grandfather and all that, anything they did, you probably did. Do you know what I mean? So in terms of the experience of reference points of like, look, I knew what it was like to go to the prom. I knew what it was like to do this. I knew what it was like to do that. Whereas the kids today, they don't do half the things. Like, there isn't a kid today, if they've got a smartphone and internet access, have ever just been bored. They've never just been on a bus, never just been on a train and been bored. Because, I mean, in your military career, how many times did you travel with nothing to stare at except the wall?
Oh, jeez. Yeah. I boarded a bus from El Paso, Texas. When I deployed to Iraq, they were shipping out too many people. I was part of the surge.
Yeah.
And I drove a day and a half on a bus up to Dallas, Texas for them to ship us out for no reason whatsoever. Just like 2 days of my life staring at the back of the seat. It was, things like that. I sure hope they don't do that anymore.
No, but today you'd do that with a smartphone and some headphones and just watch YouTube or watch videos.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would
have helped a lot.
Yeah. And I think there's a missed treasure in boredom.
Well, you don't have to be constantly entertained. I mean, you can entertain yourself, come up with ideas, writing, just go explore the world a little bit, head outdoors. Yeah, this generation, a lot of them struggle with that.
Yeah, definitely. What is it you'd like to see communities and parents come together and do?
Number one, just recognize that their role is absolutely critical. So the best resource we have that any community has is its people. So teachers, coaches, volunteers, mentors, and families. That means everything. The role that they play, I think, is often discounted. But when you look at people engaging their communities, volunteering in schools, in churches, coaching Little League, coaching soccer, those types of things have a huge part to play. I've worked with, special forces and special operators. These guys are true heroes. These are the guys when you've got a Thai soccer team. You remember 2018,
Mm-hmm.
trapped in those cave systems?
Yeah.
Everyone thought they were going to die. You pick up the bat phone. These are the guys that you call. I mean, that's the tip of the spear. The team's kicking down doors and taking down bin Laden. I mean, that's tip of the spear.
Yeah.
We can't all do that, right? Like I save lives. I do not take lives.
Mm.
Um, the weight behind the spear is just as important. Every one of those special forces operators has a favorite teacher, coach, a mentor, somebody that gave them the amazing confidence to do what they do. And that's what community should be about. You know, harnessing that best resource that we have and teaching the skills that, our future heroes need to be successful. And communities have a huge part to play in that. They need to be recognized for that.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. You said something I've not really thought about before, but everybody because the special forces are the best of the for want of a better term, the best of the common man. You get all the ordinary people in the room. They're the ones that will always rise to the top when it comes to the mental side of stuff.
Oh, mentally, physically, these individuals are just top tier Olympic athletes.
Yeah.
On top of just nerves of steel. I mean, they've been asked to do things that you can't even fathom, and they just don't even think twice about it. Just knock it out and go about their day. Hey, maybe you'll live, maybe you won't.
Yeah.
We need you to do this. Yes, sir. And some crazy stories. But working with individuals like that really helps highlight that tip of the spear. And then you realize as you talk with these individuals how they got to that point. And it has everything to do with the people in their lives that were the weight behind their spear.
It's nice. It's a nice phrase, isn't it, when you say it like that? Because, like, whenever I've heard interviews with the special, any form of special forces, doesn't matter what country it comes from, everyone always talks about it's their mental resilience, and that they did training with somebody who was just as fit or even fitter, even stronger. But when it got difficult, they could have carried on, but mentally it wasn't there. And it's the edge that these guys have mentally to put up with discomfort, that uncomfortable unknown. And then, oh, by the way, I'm an elite athlete as well. It just...
Yeah, they're a little crazy. 99.99% of people would just never do the things that they've done. My cousin Zach is a special operator, just retired in April. And for a team building exercise, he tells a story where they tied him to a bench and they threw him in the bottom of a pool. And how long can you hold your breath? Your team's got that amount of time to find a way to get you untied and out of there. And if they're a little late, you die. Like, you okay with that? Sure. Tie me up. Let's go. Like, that's insane.
That's a big ask.
Nobody does that. I could never do that. I just trying to... Oof. I mean, but you build trust in your team, right? Like, I have complete faith that these guys are going to untie me within a minute and 30 seconds, 2 minutes. How long can you possibly hold your breath? I guess we're going to find out.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to fathom that. I think if you trained, I think the average person does a good amount of training. You can hold your breath under reasonable circumstances for about 3 minutes. Like with lots of training. I don't mean like, a couple of days. If you practice and practice and practice, you can probably build it up to about 3 minutes, I think it is. Certainly 2.5. But to do that under pressure, to stop that adrenaline kicking in, so you don't...
Yeah, you got to slow your heart rate down and everything.
Yeah, because that's
going to be consuming that oxygen.
Because to just sit here and breathe and hold your breath and practice that, or in a pool, just okay. But that's a really relaxed... You can really relax into that and have some fun. But
that's very anxiety provoking. Wow.
Yeah, and that's because that's going to, like, the way that's going to burn the oxygen in your body. And you know what I mean? I just like, yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? And again,
I can't do that.
No. Yeah. Wow, that's. I'm thinking about that. Just how to be able to, because that's I think that's what sets them apart, isn't it? It's that trust that it's okay. I'm helpless. You're going to figure it out. and that's okay with me. So I'll just wait, shall I?
Yeah, it's impressive.
It's not for me.
Yeah.
It is just not for me. And yeah, so how is it because it's going back to that thing, the weight behind the spear, because that's interesting, because all of these, if these people have a good enough community, and which either nurtured them or inspired them, it's going to make them want to serve their community and their country in some way.
Yeah. That's, pay it forward to the next generation. And that's really what the whole book is about.
Yeah, it's definitely something missing in today's world, that there just is, like, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know the solutions in that sense. I can hypothesize what I think everyone should do, but then that's no different than if I ruled the world, it'd be a better place.
Yeah, and it's a little bit something different for everybody, right? Some people don't want to coach Little League soccer and football or baseball, and they've got other talents. So everyone has unique talent. Everyone's good at something. Everybody has a breaking point. Like we said, like just some individuals just have insanely high breaking points. But everybody brings something different to the table. And for the people that feel isolated or kind of removed from their community, they have something to give. And that's what I'm trying to encourage people to do. Find that gift. Find a way to make your community a better place.
What is there? Anything else, like in terms of, because I see you ran for Congress and stuff like that.
Yeah, I tried. I'm concerned enough about a lot of things I've seen, like in the military as a commander and just in my community, and just failed policies, and trying to make a difference. Unfortunately, I was outspent by $12 million, and that's just part of the game of politics. I felt I was a much better qualified candidate, but at the end of the day, somebody just blasted out $12 million of commercials, and I could not overcome that. So, using this is the book, and I've started a foundation, Weight Behind the Spear Foundation, to really get people to engage their communities, promote volunteerism. Right now, we're working on, raising money and volunteering for Western North Carolina. It was really just decimated by Hurricane Helene, if you've seen that in the news.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways to make a difference. Apparently, God had a different plan for me, so it's not going to be Congress.
That's always a fascinating one for me as well. What is God to you?
Yeah, for me, I was raised in a Christian household. I was baptized Catholic. I was raised Lutheran, and for me, it really is about just faith in community, neighbors, love. It's religion is something different to everyone, I suppose, but it's just, for me, it's just about a community and just a kind of a guiding force in your life.
Yeah, well, I separate religion and faith. So I was raised, I'm a Catholic. I was baptised a Catholic. My mum is from Southern Ireland, so I always refer to myself as a Southern Irish Catholic.
Okay.
They were staunch Catholics. It was the Irish background. If you can imagine, my mum, like my grandparents and stuff like that, the old school Catholics from Ireland. That was my upbringing, and it was pleasant. Don't get me wrong, it was pleasant.
Right, that was my family as well.
Yeah.
So the Irish Catholics, the McConkeys and Whaleys. My grandma was on the Whaley side. There was good Whaleys and bad Whaleys. We were good Whaleys. Yeah. Like if you're into history with the General Cromwell,
Oh right, yeah.
So we were on the good Whaley side, but so my dad, Irish Catholic all the way, got the red hair and everything.
Nice, but it's. So I separate religion and faith, because religion is, and I don't mean it to be a negative before anyone thinks I'm trying to sort of like put it down. For me, that there's religion, which is an institution with buildings, which despite the fact I'm passionate about churches and I love visiting them, just socially, I don't go to church. I do pray. I have faith, and I've discussed it before that every now and again, it's when I feel that detachment is when I'm at my worst.
Yeah. That's a pretty good descriptor there. I mean, as far as religion versus the faith, I mean, faith is really how you carry that into your actual everyday life. And
Yeah,
do you have faith and do you practice the faith? I know a lot of people that go to church that don't look like they have a lot of faith.
I was I was at work yesterday and I read the the Lord is my shepherd to somebody and explained that on a level that's but basically anxiety, and that if you read the prayer and read it out aloud, you're talking to the Lord to say that, look, even though I'm anxious, I'll trust in you. That's yeah, because the shadows of the death is it's anxiety. It's anxiety closing in on you and warping your mind. That's what it's about. If you do mean that, well, that's that interpretation of it in the modern world. If I look at things like feeling anxious and stuff, that's the darkness of the shadows of death, and
Yeah.
and if you look at it as the Lord is my shepherd, and I shout, I'll be fine. You will take care of me regardless, and put my faith in that. Then actually maybe I'll feel less anxious.
Yeah, I've been super blessed. I've been through some pretty crazy situations, and it's always been there for me. So
Because when you are in the ER and you see, I think for somebody, and correct me please, it must be difficult when you see what humans will do to each other.
oof. Yeah, I have seen some horrific things. You know, you get very jaded in the emergency department. You really see the worst of people. You see the worst of humanity,
Mm.
and that's why the burnout rate is so high in emergency medicine, because we all go into this career to help people and heal and do good things. And when you just constantly see the violence. I spent 1 month in Baltimore, Maryland, when I was a resident at Shock Trauma, a world-class trauma facility. And just the very first night on call, just people do horrific things. So there was a domestic violence incident where a gentleman is beating his pregnant girlfriend. He
Ah,
beats her near to death. He drags her into the back of a van and then systematically heats up a cigarette lighter and kind of burns her. And then he douses the whole thing in kerosene and sets it on fire. I mean, she lived amazingly, and just working on that, it was a gruesome burn patient. She's pregnant, all these things going on. You're like, what kind of person does that?
you've got
Like,
to have some pain inside you
man,
to do that to people.
if you didn't believe that there was complete and total evil in the world, like after that, I don't know. You've just seen horrible things. But you take solace in the fact that God's trying to work through you, and I
Yeah,
saved a lot of lives. There's quite a few I haven't been able to save, and I just have always worked the hardest, and felt that God worked through me, and He's going to take who He wants to take, and there's not anything I can do about it. So, otherwise, if you don't have a strong faith, I don't know how you could do this job, because it's horrific. So, yeah, my faith has got me through a lot.
that's nice. I do like that. And I think it's one of the things that when people talk about faith community, it's again the literal meaning of you reap what you sow. It's not just about filling the cupboard up and making sure you're okay for the winter. It's, do you know what, if we do this on a wider expanse and check on our neighbours and create a community where the neighbours know that somebody's looking out for them, you reap what you sow. You have a very kindred community that looks out for each other.
Yeah.
And that
Takes a village to raise a child, for sure.
yeah, it does. And quite a few podcasts ago, I was really lucky. I had I can't remember his name. It's the Bishop of Ramsbury.
Wow.
And yeah, I got to talk to him about some churches, because he is in charge of the diocese churches, and how because obviously not all of them are being used anymore, and it's like, how do we keep them going? So it's a fascinating conversation, and or at least one that I really enjoyed, because we were talking about we were laughing because his family have been clergy quite a few generations down, and his wife's family have always been Republicans or farmers. But I said, if you look at that, him and I were talking, I said, when he said that, the first thing that I thought about was that's the integral beginning of every community: a pub, a farm, and a church.
Absolutely.
Because all of the traditional pubs in Europe, were inns where travelers would come and stay. It was a safe place to eat, to drink, and sleep. And again, it's because it's the three. You have the mind, body, the spirit. You have the Holy Trinity.
Yeah, Staples right there.
Yeah. And from that, every community grows. And
yeah, there's certainly a strong argument that the further you get away from some of those basic staples is where you kind of see the fabric of society really kind of tear, and that's a whole other argument right there. But yeah, those basics, that's really the foundation.
It is, and I wonder how much of today's depression and anxiety and the people where people don't find themselves, is it because we've stepped away from some basic essentials?
Definitely has a part to play. Social media does not help.
I reckon it can, though. I do think it can be a tool for the good.
Well, you see, and I say that from the generation that didn't have it growing up, right? Because we mentioned that already. So for that sense of belonging, and I think that's probably part of that generational divide. Is I really kind of value the actual real personal relationships and talking with people and meeting in person versus like the social media world where everything is just online. And for this generation, that is their reality.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm probably a little bit old enough where I differ in that, but it's definitely, for those kids, it can be a good thing.
Because where I try to have a positive spin on it is that I can talk to you about your foundation and what your foundation is going to try and achieve, and you would hope that somebody listens to this might reach out and say, hey, I'd like to do something in my community. What would you suggest?
You start simple. Find some organizations like volunteering at at one of the shelters or a food pantry. Coach little league sports. Baseball and soccer. Schools, churches. There's so many different organizations and nonprofit organizations that you can be a part of. If there's something that you're passionate about, like one of the cat or dog shelters. My daughter loves animals, so there's so many opportunities for you to get out there and give back to your community. There's something that you can be passionate about. I mean, everyone has a passion, and everyone's a little bit different. So find something that you are passionate about that you can give to.
In the book, there's a bit that was sent to me by the publicist, and it talks about the book is divided into the 4 parts.
Yep.
Could you just go through them for me?
Yeah. So the first part of the book, that ethos, the be the weight behind the spear. So the first section is really how do you be the weight? What is it that you're looking for when you talk leadership, accountability, just having some resiliency and overcoming obstacles, just some of those basic skills. Like that's really what you need to be the weight behind the spear. The second section of the book is how to not be the weight behind the spear. Yeah. So some great examples of a lot of douchebaggery. All right. Yeah. So between CEOs and embezzling money and violating what I felt were for very obvious violations of laws, turning down a $3.4 million bribe after turning him into the FBI, and then COVID hit and he tried to bankrupt the company. Things got bizarre. So that's how you not be the weight behind the spear. And then there's a whole chapter on the opioid crisis and the epidemic. We're killing 120,000 Americans a year now, with illicit drug overdoses. And I see that. That's how I see it work every day. And there's definitely a part to play with some, high level executives, like the pharmaceutical companies. Everybody knows who Purdue Pharma is. Just lied about the addictive nature of these drugs, and we're killing a lot of people as a result. So that's how you not be the weight behind the spear. And then really the third section of just things that shaped my way, some unique experiences being overseas, things that I saw. And then the very last section is my weight, my family, my wife and children. She's got a great story from her. She has an immigrant background. Her parents are both Cuban, immigrated when they were children, and some good stories there. And then it just ends up with that last chapter on, it starts off with a bit. Are you a Smashing Pumpkins fan? Do you like music?
Yeah, I know who you want about.
All right, so you know who Billy Corgan is, right?
No, but I know who the Smashing Pumpkins are.
Oh, okay, lead singer and guitarist for the Smashing Pumpkins.
Okay,
all right. So I just started that off with just a section of the lyrics of "Today Is the Greatest," and it's a very ironic song because when Billy Corgan wrote that, he was depressed and suicidal. So here's someone who had attained great things. Their album Siamese Dream was just blew up on the charts, put him on the map. Certainly money, the fame, everything he really thought he ever wanted, but he was depressed. And he wrote this song, "Today Is the Greatest," because it can't possibly get any worse. So it was very ironic. And America is a wonderful and beautiful place, but it's not perfect. And we have a lot of issues that we need to address. But at the end of the day, I really feel that America is one of the last bastions of freedom on the planet. And it's very unique and special. So we're going to have our 250th year celebration here in 2 years, 2026. We actually host the World Cup as well. So 2026 is going to be an amazing year. And I thought it was a great way to end the book. And then I put a quote from Abraham Lincoln on the bottom of it. So that's how the book shaped up.
I do think that's something that Americans don't understand. I went to California in 2019. I've been lucky enough to go once, and I was surfing. And I managed to go from San Francisco down to San Diego in a big RV with my mate. And he broke his toes, like snapped two of them completely in half. So obviously we're not surfing anymore. And for people that don't know what that feels like, trust me, you're not going to be walking around when you've snapped two of your toes.
Oh yeah.
They're not fractures. The actual X-ray is like, oh no, they've snapped in half completely. And so we then ended up coming up through Yosemite and stuff like that in this big RV sort of thing. And one of the things that astounded me when I was talking to Americans, just coffee shop, bars, whatever, and they're like, what do you think of America? And it's just like, you guys have no idea how good your country is. And I said, and that's your problem. I said, none of you.
Yeah. It's all relative. I've been in Central Africa. I've been in the Middle East. I've been in Asia. We have every advantage here. And when you hear some of the stories, or just my kids, like, how do you articulate, seeing, what goes on in Central Africa, and you talk about the Rwandan genocide in 1994. Haven't gone through that genocide museum, and I'm a huge, history guy. And then you articulate to your children when they whine about this, or I don't have the most recent iPhone, or, well, so is doing this. I'm like, listen, 90% of this world is worried about keeping your family alive. Just the horrors and the trauma that so many communities have to go through with civil wars and strife and crime. Central South America is really struggling right now.
And the corruption.
You have no idea what the world goes through every day. So that's tough. How do you articulate that to your kids?
I struggled to articulate that to adults when I was over there.
Yeah.
They would be. I was like, no. I said, the problem is, I said, none of you realise how great your country is. I said, and there's a difference between being a great country and perfection. It's not perfection.
Yeah, nothing's perfect.
But in comparison, and I say to people, and I apply this rule to Brits as well. If you're complaining about Great Britain, Western Europe, or America, I know you haven't travelled anywhere.
So Winston Churchill,
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite historical figures, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others that we've tried.
Yeah.
So nothing's perfect, but I love some Winston Churchill quotes. Damn,
But that's a really good quote, and that's a really good way of looking at it, because the only example of anything, there is no example of anything that's worked. Not, it's in terms of, if you're going to judge it by perfection. But if you're going to judge it by infrastructure, education, medical facilities, finances, the ability to walk down the street and not be stolen, oh, guess what? Anywhere in the West is a pretty good place to live. And you only have to go. You don't have to go that far back in our own history to like it. It hasn't always been this good. Yeah, it is. So, what were some of the experiences that you, the My Way, where you highlight some of the foundations of leadership drawn from experiences in combat?
Yeah. So what's the question?
So what is that? Do you know what I mean? It's just because you're an MD. So like you said earlier, you save lives, don't take them. But you also meant, some of the things that to do with opioids and stuff that you see. So it's a strange one, because you're seeing the worst of everything. You're seeing the worst things that humans do to each other with weapons, and then the worst things that humans do to each other and call them cures.
Yeah. It's, having those unique experiences. I tried to articulate those, as best I could with just some stories. One of the stories of, being in the emergency department, having come back from Iraq, where you see so much death and destruction. And I ran a pediatric code. So like a sudden infant death, like a SIDS baby that didn't survive. It's 2 or 3 in the morning. And my entire staff is pretty distraught, or we're crying with the family, and we walk out of the room, and you just get accosted by this mother. And she's got a 14-year-old son, and he has an ingrown toenail. Literally an ingrown toenail. And I'm sure it's painful. I don't want to minimize that. But she's like, hey, we've been waiting a long time. And I explained to her, I'm sorry, we just ran a pediatric code next door, and the child didn't live. And she says, well, I don't care. We were here first. And I just snapped. I lost it. I yelled at her. I said, get out of my emergency department, with some very colorful language. And she said, you can't do that. I was like, security, throw her out of this emergency department right now. And, my nursing staff was, because everyone's wanted to say something like that, like their whole life.
Yeah.
Emergency medicine, you just see crazy people all the time. But you can't really do that. So that's where I had to, Elsa, my wife, we just talked, like, listen, I don't know if I'm coping very well with coming back to civilian life right now. And she had the amazing idea to just bail to New Zealand. So that's when we had moved to New Zealand. I practiced down there. I played soccer at Rotorua United and worked in a little emergency department, and got my head back on straight and enjoyed life. And obviously started having kids, got married in New Zealand, and came back to the States. So everyone's got their own little journey and path in life. And I hopefully those stories, help someone who's struggling with some PTSD issues, or, somebody in the military community, or someone who's dealt with some difficult things. And, it's kind of hard to reintegrate back into society when you've been away and doing things like that. But I feel like I'm in a good place now. So I attribute that to my wife.
But do you, if somebody, who is struggling, where would you, I'm trying to think how to ask this correctly. When I say where should they start to look, I mean internally. What should they look for in themselves? So,
Yeah,
Yeah, go on.
when you kind of lost that joy. I mean, emergency medicine is pretty crazy. I love to help people. I don't like go to work in the emergency department and just absolutely love every second of it. It's a very difficult job. Like I said, the burnout rate is really high. But when you start losing interest and in things that you know you used to enjoy, I mean, you're withdrawing from family, from friends. A lot of people have those ineffective coping mechanisms.
Mm.
You're drinking by yourself on a Saturday night. Find yourself a nice whiskey. I mean, those danger things that you should be looking for as you withdraw or coping. The drugs and alcohol. A lot of people cope with that. You got to recognize those signs and symptoms. Hopefully, you have a good wingman, somebody, a good high school or college buddy, or somebody at work, or your spouse, your clergy, a pastor, like somebody, you know, if you're in school, your teacher or a guidance counselor. I mean, there's lots of resources. Like, don't be afraid to speak up and say something, because the longer you internalize that and you always turn to ineffective ways of coping, and it's a slippery slope. And then, I've seen a lot of suicides, and
Mm.
it's always hard to do because the families are just destroyed. I've got countless stories having to walk into rooms, 15-year-old girl that has an argument. I think it's around Christmas time, and she's wearing some outfit that dad said was inappropriate, and they're arguing, and he said something off the wall to the tune of kind of you're dressing slutty, like blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah blah. And she's like, well, this is she, I'm gonna go kill myself. And she went and strung herself up in the garage. And he walked into the
Jeez.
garage and saw her dangling there. You could just see like his life was completely destroyed. I mean, he'll never be the same. I mean, I have no idea what that guy's doing at this time, but suicide is always a horrible thing. And yeah, don't let it get that bad.
Yeah. No, that's a very tricky one. That's I nearly did that myself once. So like in my 20s. Yeah. So it's a dark road.
I mean, everybody has a breaking point, and that's what you have to tell them. Like, listen, what you're feeling is like people think things like this.
Mm.
Everyone has a breaking point. Like the strongest, most well put together, mentally tough special forces operator on the planet. These guys can live and survive anything. They have suicides.
Yeah.
Everybody has a breaking point. Life happens, families, relationships, work, money. I mean, you can only take so much, and you have to be able to lean on the people around you. So, like, don't be afraid to talk about it and get help. Don't let it get so bad. But yeah, suicide, it is an illness.
Oh
You
yeah. I
can't
mean,
just
I
pull yourself out of it. That's not really how it works.
no. I mean, when I reflect back on it, um, I the only way I can articulate it, the first thing is it's definitely different for everybody.
Mhm.
But the only way that I can articulate it to people is if you think of the average inner dialogue for people, the person that's going down that road of suicide, their entire inner dialogue and perception of life is, I don't like the person I see in the mirror.
Yeah.
And if you invest in that enough, the compound interest starts to turn into, well, why don't you do something about the person you see in the mirror? And I don't know how else to describe it, because it's like I said, it's different for everybody. But that's kind of the common theme, is that the you kind of go down this strange road where self-preservation gets eroded, and you just kind of self-sabotage and self-harm on some emotional level, where you're just invested in making yourself feel bad about who you are and what you've, even when you haven't done anything. And
Mhm.
you get to the point of feeling so worthless that it gets, well, the question inevitably be, what's the point?
Yeah. Well, and that's hard to share, man. Thank you for sharing.
It's the only reason I talk about it is because and it's one of the reasons I defend social media, is because I am 100% certain if the internet was around the same way it is today, I could have listened to people say the same and been able to say that's how
Yeah.
I felt.
Yes. So that's doing something positive, like
Yeah.
the social media and the digital world we live in. So
Well, weirdly,
that's
if
a great point.
I tried to talk about it once and it got removed from Instagram and TikTok for using that S word.
Oh,
So I always try to, but I do like to, I don't like, it always makes me feel uncomfortable in that sense. But I do feel a responsibility to let people know that it happens, because for all intents and purposes, if I hadn't mentioned it to you, you'd have no idea, because I appear to be this very vibrant, confident podcaster, but wasn't always like that, but I know where I came from, if you like, and I remember the pain that I was in when it was happening, and it's I'm not going to belittle it by saying it's a mindset, but it's a very good start. And then if you can take positive action, and I do believe that one of the things that you were talking about, there was just this isolation. There was nobody that I was prepared to talk to, largely because there's just nobody else was talking about it. For all intents and purposes, I was living in London, living the life, going out drinking with my mates. I was having a great, on the outside looking in, I was having a great time. But it's not how I used to feel when I went back to my flat. And he's just wanted, like I say, and at one point I even shared, I was house sharing it. None of the people all lovely people, none of them knew what was going on inside my head. They didn't know what I was thinking about, and I wasn't going to share it with them because nobody was talking about it.
Yeah.
You're not about to sort of drop that clanger over a barbecue on a Saturday afternoon and a few beers in. It's like, by the way, just any of you feeling like a little bit, the end is near.
That's tough.
And I started to become very, very aware of how much fun everybody was having, and that even though I was joining in the fun and the laughter and the smiling, the happiness was really superficial, because I could be there, like I could weirdly be like having a good laugh, going a good joke with somebody, but have this awareness that in the back of my head, it's like, nah, you're not happy.
Yeah.
Even
putting on the show for people, right?
Yeah, very much so. And you would try and do it as well. You'd really force yourself to do it because there was a part of you that wanted to be happy. You wanted to feel, you'd look at people with envy because you could see they were just giddy in their joy and with their friendships and stuff. You crave that. Like, I wish I had that. I wish I had something I could do. I wish you could like people. I wish I had that passion. For years I used to envy anybody. One of the first questions I asked you was like, how do you keep your head down? How do you get it all done? Because it comes from that fear, that place that fear took me once, because I'd envy people with passion because I wasn't passionate about anything. And I started to kind of judge myself, like, well, you don't have any real hobbies. You're not you're not mad about reading. You're not mad about music. You're not mad about films. You're like a real middle of the road guy. Well, what's the point of living like that? You're supposed to be, and it's, and of course, actually, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just somebody that likes everything.
Yeah, and you found it now, obviously.
Yeah. I think so. It definitely massively helps. Because I get to, but that's the thing is, I then, because I coach as well, I work with people that have head injuries and stuff, and I coach, and I'm a qualified hypnotherapist and stuff. So I discovered that actually what it is that I'm interested in is people.
That's a great interest to have.
Yeah, it is. It's just like, I like talking to people, and it turns out, and in stressful situations when people need someone to talk to, I'm pretty good at it.
Sweet.
But it was, like I said, so that was one of the reasons I do love the internet, is because actually you can do things where, like I said, if people listen to this, and when they listen,
we're chatting right now.
Yeah, exactly, and it definitely helps people when they hear two other people talking about it from different perspectives, different backgrounds, different experiences, because if they're in that dark place, things resonate, and as soon as that resonates with them. Look, the same as you and I had a really interesting conversation about faith and where Jesus sits compared to being in a church, and just hearing two people talk about their faith and a prayer, if somebody is losing their faith or feeling belittled by it, to hear two other people talking about it from their own perspectives and why it's important to them can pull them back into the right place. Because they're not, even though they're not theoretically in the room with us, they're not isolated anymore because they're hearing the same voices.
It's great.
That went very deep. So yeah, well, that's I suppose almost brings us to a conclusion. Actually, could you just tell me a little bit more about the foundation?
Yeah, so the foundation, the Weight Behind the Spear Foundation, I won the lottery earlier this year, and talk about some
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pretty amazing blessing, and it's allowed me to have resources to get this message out there. So the foundation, I've just started that. When we saw what happened in Western North Carolina, it's just an entire region of our state that was just destroyed. I mean, towns and villages just literally wiped off the map, and people are really hurting. And I just wanted to do something. I can't not do anything. That's just not how I'm wired. So starting the foundation, we can raise money, get involved, promote volunteerism, and that really just takes the book to the next level. So I didn't just write a book and throw it out there and hope people buy it. Like I'm using it. I want people to do that, and so this is where I'm putting that out there and starting this foundation. And we've got some pretty exciting announcements coming up here in the next couple of weeks. Right now, everything is dominated by our election. So,
yeah.
It's everything's being drowned out right now. But as soon as that election's over, we've got some great announcements and we can get some great things done.
That's good though, because it's nice because regardless of the result, it's fine. We've got our own plan. We're doing our own thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've got lots to keep me busy, and there's a lot of good we can do in the world. There's all these doomsdayers. If one side wins versus the other side winning, like, hey, listen, it's America. We are going to persevere. Right? This too shall pass, and we're going to get things. I mean, things done that need to get done. So start my own foundation. We'll make sure it gets done.
Genuinely, I hope it all goes really, really well for you.
Thank you.
Lastly, a completely random question that I'd just like to ask.
Sure.
I want you to imagine you had a time machine and you go to any place in history, anytime, any when. Where would you go? Why? What car would you drive? And what music would you listen to?
Ooh. Well, I would surely travel back to a time before vehicles. So
it's a magical world, so you can still take a car.
Oh, I'd still take a car.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
You don't have to, but...
Yeah, boy, there's so much just big historical events, Go back to, like, the Gettysburg Address, and to see Abraham Lincoln give one of the more famous addresses in American history, and to watch that. They had some horses and buggies, so I just kind of rolled through there in something non-discreet. I'll just pick. So my first car was a 1976 Ford Pinto.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Ford Pinto. If you got rear-ended, it exploded. So, just something, a really significant time period like that for me. That would be a lot of fun.
And what music would you listen to in that Pinto?
I just go with Smashing Pumpkins. I love Smashing Pumpkins. That's my favorite band. That was my first concert. I did reach out to Billy Corgan. I wanted to use more of the lyrics. So, with all the legality stuff there, with copyright use, the fair use of that, I had to shave it down to just a certain number of lines. But as a courtesy, I did reach out to some of his publicists. I got through like 2 or 3 layers of people before it just died.
Yeah.
But I wanted to see if I could actually get a conversation with him just to ask him for permission to use the lyrics.
Yeah, but it's nice though, wouldn't it?
I got through a few people. It was fun.
Yeah, but that's thank you very much for your time. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Oh, this has been great. This is a very unique conversation. I appreciate that very much.
Take care.
Awesome. Take care.
And there you go. That was Be the Weight Behind the Spear. And as often happens in these episodes, one of the things I enjoy is sharing Christian faith, for want of a better term. But also there is this common theme that always just comes around again, repeats itself. Communities that fail are communities where people don't invest. And when people invest in their communities, it pays back dividends, compound interest, it's tenfold. It becomes a personal investment in their own self, their worth, their purpose, and it develops strong ties in the community that make big differences. And I hope that people who listen to this, if you need help, if your life isn't going the way you want, don't give up. Reach out. You never know who might be able to help, or more importantly, how you might be able to help. And as always, thank you very much for listening. I do appreciate all of the support, everyone that subscribes, everyone that listens, everybody that shares and watches. Wherever you are from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed. Thank you.